Brian De Palma. For over 50 years, that name has meant suspense, it's meant controversy, and it's meant a visual style so unique you know you're watching one of his films from the very first frame. He's the guy behind some absolute masterpieces and, yeah, some legendary flops. But here's the thing, love him or hate him, you can never, ever call him boring. So today, let's dive into the split-screen world of a true cinematic maverick. This quote really just hits the nail on the head. Whether he's making a thriller that has you literally on the edge of your seat, or a gangster flick that splits critics right down the middle, a Brian De Palma film is always unapologetically his. He commits to the vision, for better or for worse, and honestly, that's what makes him so endlessly fascinating.
All right, so where does a guy like De Palma even fit in the grand scheme of things? Well, he was a huge player in what we call the New Hollywood movement back in the 60s and 70s. This was this amazing generation of filmmakers, they called them the movie brats, who basically grew up on movies, went to film school, and just completely blew up and redefined what an American movie could be.
I mean, just look at this list. Look at the company he kept. Scorsese, Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola. These were his buddies, his peers, all part of this incredible creative tidal wave. But while they were off making blockbuster space operas and epic crime sagas, De Palma, well, he carved out a much darker, much more controversial niche for himself. The psychological and often super violent thriller.
So to really get what makes his movies tick, you've got to learn to speak his language. De Palma is a stylist through and through. He doesn't just tell you a story, he builds it piece by piece with a very specific set of visual tools. And they're all designed to mess with you, the audience, to build tension, and to play with your whole sense of reality.
He's got 3 signature moves, his go-to techniques that you'll see in his work again and again. And believe me, these aren't just flashy camera tricks. They are the fundamental grammar of his filmmaking. First up, the split screen. Now, think of it this way. De Palma is making us the all-seeing eye. We get to see 2 different things happening at the exact same time, but the poor characters in the movie, they can only see what's on their side of the frame. This creates this just unbearable suspense because we know more than they do, and we're just sitting there waiting for those 2 worlds to violently collide. Next is something called the split diopter lens. Okay, this one's a little more technical, but the effect is just incredible. It's a special lens that lets him keep something right up close in the foreground and something way in the background in perfect, sharp focus at the same time. It creates this layered, almost surreal image where 2 totally separate moments feel deeply and usually ominously connected in one single shot. And finally, the long take. Oh man, De Palma is an absolute master of the extended, uncut shot. Instead of a bunch of quick edits, he'll just let the camera roll, following characters through these really complex spaces, like that legendary chase sequence through the train station in Carlito's Way. The effect is total immersion. You're not just watching the action, you feel like you're right there, holding your breath with no way out. So we've seen his toolkit, the what. But the real question is, why? Why does he use these techniques over and over? What are the obsessions that drive this style? This is the heart of his work. His style isn't just for show. It's a direct pipeline into his thematic universe.
I mean, his films are just drenched in these recurring themes: voyeurism, the act of watching, doppelgangers, and this really unsettling idea that our reality is subjective, that you just can't trust what you see. These ideas are everywhere, from sisters to body double to dress to kill. His characters are almost always watching someone, being watched by someone, or totally misreading what's right in front of them.
But where does all this come from? Is it just a filmmaker's gimmick, or is there something, deeper going on? Well, the answer seems to lie in a mix of his own life experiences and this core philosophical idea he latched onto really early in his career. See, as a young man, De Palma quite literally learned to watch. He used to observe his dad, who was a physician, performing surgeries. And then, more dramatically, he apparently spent time spying on his own father to try and find proof of his affairs. Think about that for a second. This early education in looking for hidden truths, in peeling back the layers to see what's really underneath, that became a cornerstone of his art. And this is where it all just clicks into place. This idea crystallized in a documentary he made way back in 1966. In it, he says, "Perceptual experience does not conform with physical fact." That one sentence, that's the key. That is the key that unlocks his entire career. He is obsessed with the gap between what our eyes see and what's actually real. His films are basically the ultimate optical illusion.
Okay, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. You can't talk about De Palma without talking about this. The biggest criticism thrown at him for his entire career is that he's just a copycat, specifically that he just rips off the master of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock.
And look, the evidence seems pretty damning, right? Critics will point to a film like Obsession and its very clear parallels to Vertigo, or Dressed to Kill, and how it echoes Psycho. The plot points, the themes of voyeurism and doubles, it really begs the question, is he just a really talented mimic? But here's the other side of that argument. De Palma himself has said he sees Hitchcock not as someone to copy, but as a grammarian. In his view, Hitchcock basically invented the visual language of the suspense movie. So for De Palma to use that language isn't theft, it's just speaking the language. He's participating in an artistic tradition. He's not just repeating Hitchcock, he's building on his work, pushing it to new, more explicit, and frankly more modern extremes. So after all the controversy and the Hitchcock debates and the films that people either love or violently hate, why are we still talking about Brian De Palma? What makes these films last? It's because for De Palma, his style and his substance are the exact same thing. His whole approach to filmmaking works on two levels. Literally, yeah, he splits the screen with his techniques, showing us multiple viewpoints at once. But metaphorically, he's telling stories about fractured people and subjective realities. For him, a single objective truth is an illusion. The style is the point. This quote from one of his old teachers is just so perfect. He is his own opposite. This idea of duality, of the split, seems to be baked into who he is as a person. People describe him as this calm, intellectual guy who makes these explosive, passionate, and often outrageous movies. His work is a perfect reflection of that internal contradiction. And that's the real magic trick. De Palma uses the language of the thriller, all the suspense, the violence, the voyeurism, to make a much deeper point about perception itself. His films make us question what we're seeing both on the screen and in the world around us. They are thrillers that are fundamentally about how unreliable an image can be, and about the deeply unsettling act of watching. And that's what makes De Palma's work feel more important and more relevant right now than maybe ever before. You know, in our world of deepfakes and curated social media feeds and warring narratives, his central obsession feels eerily prophetic. It leaves us with a really provocative question. In a world where every truth seems to have a counter-truth, is a single unified perspective even honest anymore? Maybe telling it split is the only way to tell it at all?